Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Before I continue reading, do you want to say something?
In this paragraph we will read, there are points I want to make by referring to the passages we read last week. Some friends told me that there was some confusion about the topic of the being's comprehension. So, as we read and discuss, I'd like to try my best to make things a little bit clearer.
Alright, let's continue reading. The implication of incarnation, which is a word not carrying a proper expressional power, is being, in order to serve the spirit that owns itself, more correctly, spirit, in order to be able to utilize the matter of a crude cosmos via the being serving itself, is compelled to build and use a vehicle of influence, that is, a crude body out of matter of that cosmos. However, that being is not yet powerful enough to build such immense combinations out of crude matter by itself. Because of this, it will, according to its need, which actually means the need of spirit, build a body for itself with the assistance of superior beings that are with duty of the evolution of spirits out of crude matter and connect to it by continuously sending influences to it. And then the being will do activities among the crude matter and other beings pertaining to the needs of its spirit, which has started its communal evolution in that world, through this body it has built. That is, the being will manage that body in accordance with the behaviors of the spirit. After all, that body is built of a caliber to be managed by it. So, here, there is a being and a body, serving the spirit through each other. One of these is the being, owning a complex matter structure that we have previously mentioned, and following the spirit throughout the universe, which is a very subtle energy complex, the symbol, reflection, and expression of spirit in the universe. And the second one is a crude body, made out of dense matter of that cosmos, for that being to be able to serve the spirit, using as a vehicle of inter-influence with matter and beings in the crude cosmos in which it is compelled to render applications. So, the body which has to serve the being that will accompany the spirit throughout the universe is but a temporary vehicle that will remain connected to that being only during a temporary cycle of application in accordance with the needs of spirit at any crude sphere. The being, in the milieu it exists, once it meets the needs of the spirit it serves, leaves its previous body in order to build another body, suitable for its new needs. And this happens, again, with the help of higher influences. So, the being's building a second body in any sphere is named by mankind as incarnation or birth, and its leaving that body is named by mankind as disincarnation or death. I think this passage explains the system very clearly. What do you want to say?
As I mentioned, our friends asked questions about the comprehension in the being. Last week we read these sentences. Let me read. Because the beings using these cells are still non-comprehending, this manner of their corporeality may be called a kind of incarnation. This phrase, non-comprehending, and the sentence we repeated, ferment of the being is comprehension, confuse them, so I'd like to dwell on this point. So, let me read from previous pages. Spirits that have evolved with them up to that stage, always with the help of the original influences, have also reached the capability of gathering these high but disarrayed energies and make a being out of them. Capability is a key word here. And also, let me read the more detailed parts related to this from the further pages, but first, please remember that, since its publication in 2013, we read and study the divine order and the universe, and if our friends didn't read this book as many times as we did, they may be confused when we quote parts of the book we didn't read in this series so far. Okay, I read. Comprehension is a power interconnecting the endless matter systems in the matter universe. Now, another key word. Power. The book defines comprehension as power. Again, in that page we read. We have explained how the initial components preparing the comprehension occurred during the constitution of the beings. Here, spirits were constituting these beings by gathering the energies transmitted in a disarrayed state by the developed hydrogen. The constitution of beings through these high energies, which are but high vibration complexes, triggers instincts which are the most primitive state of comprehension to manifest in these disarrayed energies. Here, secondary assistance is given as well to spirits constituting these beings. For, as previously mentioned, from the moment the being is constituted, the influences coming from above and around it, which we call secondary, takes the place of the original influences. Let us elaborate on this topic. We have said that comprehension is a power gathering matter systems together. This means that in the initial constitution of the being, hydrogen atom energies have reached such a stage of development that spirits, with the help of secondary influences as well, have attained the possibilities to use their instincts, which are the simplest state of their powers that mankind can only express and symbolize by the word comprehension, by utilizing the states of matter at this stage. Ferment of the being is comprehension. And the initial being that constituted connects, from its initial moment on, the other simpler matter combinations and systems together in accordance with the gradual development of this ferment existing in it, that is, of comprehension, and brings about new and newer combinations and systems. Yes, the point we need to understand here is, the initial being when constituted, it needs the assistance of secondary influences. What gathers these disarrayed energies at the constitution of the initial being are these secondary influences. And how do they do this? Because the spirit has reached a degree of comprehension for gathering these matters. The book will explain this concept of incarnation soon, that is, it will state that this term cannot be used for human beings. And the reason is this term means, in a way, entering into flesh. And we will read in the book when the relations between consciousness, the being and the human body, this is not the case because there is no entering into the body in birth and there is no exiting the body in death. The point is, this initial being which is built has not yet enough power to build a body for itself from the crude atoms of the hydrogen cosmos. That is why, those initial beings are non-comprehending. Yes, ferment of the being is comprehension, because it is built by comprehension, but at this initial stage, its power for gathering these atoms, even though these are simple and crude, to build a one-celled plant body. That's why, the assistance of the secondary influences is needed and then, the first body of a being in the hydrogen cosmos is built, in this way. I hope, we made this non-comprehending part a little bit clearer.
I just thought a metaphor that may help us to understand this sentence better. Especially, our friends who made sourdough bread from scratch during the lockdown days will understand what I want to mean. We add this sourdough ferment to the flour. Consider this sour ferment as the first influence. This ferment is put into the being's constitution with this first influence, yet, sour ferment must interact with the flour we added, or matter of the hydrogen cosmos. It will initiate some formations, deformations, transformations with it. In a way, this ferment in the being needs to rise, widen, increase its activity. For the bread, the sour fermented flour needs some assistance from outside, such as room temperature, etc. Let's consider this as the secondary influences. For me, this word ferment sounds so nice because when we read the widening of the comprehension as the being goes through all those developmentary stages, this word becomes more meaningful. As the ferment, the comprehension's power for forming more and more complex matter rises and widens. And again, considering all those long, almost eternal stages, the being's comprehension widens through first mechanical instincts, then intuitions and intuition comprehensions and primitive comprehensions. The sourdough metaphor may help because starting sourdough and mixing it with flour to make a bread dough and then baking it takes such a long time and attention. And when I said attention, this gave me an idea for another metaphor, this time about this incarnation word. The being sends its influence to a body, and by this constant influencing, the being maintains or sustains that body. The moment the being withdraws this influence, material body disintegrates towards its building blocks. Like an electrical gadget. We plug its cable to the socket and turn it on, and the electrical current that works this gadget is like the influence of the being that builds and maintains a body. The being's influence is like a constant attention on the body. And when we turn it off or take off the cable from the socket, that gadget reverts to its inert status. So, the bodies our beings build are similar to this example. And another thing strikes my attention here is, the beings building a body in any sphere. Not only in our world. In any sphere. So, this body can be built on the world, on other worlds and spheres. And we already read in the book that, before passing to the stage of human, the being gain experience by building bodies in other planets in the solar system. So, if we consider the fact that in order to be able to govern and manage our bodies, which is an immense universe in itself, albeit in smaller scale, by its influences and energies, or if the simile is apt, by its concentrated attention, please remember all those almost eternally long stages the being has to go through until it reaches this capacity and the level of comprehension. We know that Mr. Ruhselman was very careful about this topic of incarnation, and I guess that as he was receiving these spiritual communiqués through the medium, he must have asked this to the spiritual plan and they explained this topic as such.
Of course. Let me add something. In the further pages, the book states this. I read. After this knowledge, the expression of the embodiment of human being should be understood in this wider meaning and should not be thought to be in a narrow frame such as the concept of incarnation, which means entrance in the flesh. The term of incarnation may be used for simpler beings which are consigned to connect into cells by force. However, it is not true for a human being.
In our previous videos, we had mentioned that the divine order and the universe, while explaining concepts, it starts first with simple explanations and them in further pages, it revisits the same concept but this time in a wider context and more detailed explanation. In this passage we see this, again. In the previous pages, the book stated that because the being in the service of a spirit completely expresses all the behaviors, stirrings and needs of that spirit, we can also look at it as the spirit itself. And now, we read this. The being, owning a complex matter structure that we have previously mentioned, and following the spirit throughout the universe, which is a very subtle energy complex, the symbol, reflection, and expression of spirit in the universe. Personally, as I read the knowledge in this book, I don't feel any kind of drifting apart, rather I feel awe and admiration as I learn about this immense coordination and organization in the constitution of this whole system. And I think, such expressions like drifting away from my source are an indication of our emotional perception of things or our emotional approach to things. I wanted to underline this, again.
I'd like to make a small addition to this topic. The book states, the being will manage that body in accordance with the behaviors of the spirit. The behaviors of the spirit mean the needs of the spirit. The divine order. Again, we just read in the book that our body is built of a caliber to be managed by the being. So, what we call our being is not an external or distant structure. When we look at a mirror, we see a body, with the extremities, eyes, brows, a face. Yet, what we call I, me, myself, is actually our being, the reflection of our spirit in this universe. And a being can manage and control bodies in the hydrogen cosmos only in accordance the scope of its comprehension. And what is implied here? As how a being that couldn't finish the stage of human or a being that is in the stage of animal cannot use a body in the next level, also for a being, for example in the stage of human, using a body, as a punishment in a lower stage, is out of question.
Yes. I'll continue reading. Therefore, the being that is born in any sphere of a solar system, within a body suitable to the conditions of that sphere, reaches the last echelon of matter cosmos after going through innumerable processes of incarnation and disincarnation in various spheres of that system, according to its evolutionary need, and this last echelon, in our system, is human and in other systems, is one of the bodies at the corresponding stage of development. So, spirits evolve in this stage we call the hydrogen cosmos, not within disarrayed matter states, passively, nor by mechanical progress, as in the initial stages of development of matter, but according to the efforts they make in the states that are bound to matter, automatic or semi-comprehending. Yes, in a way, this is a good summary of what we have discussed. So, we humans, we are at the last step of our hydrogen cosmos, and in this stage, spirits evolve in automatic or semi-comprehending manner.
At this point, let's discuss automatism. When we hear this word, especially if we talk about automatic behaviors etc., it may sound like a regressed or undesired state, but actually, automatism is a must in the all workings of the nature. Starting from the forming of water molecules to all other complex molecules, and all hormonal secretions in our bodies to our flight or fight responses in face of danger etc. All of these occur automatically. So, automatism is not a state we left in the past, it is with us in our everyday life. However, what is expected from us, human beings of today, is to take our decision-making out of these automatic responses and to make these gradually more semi-comprehending. In short, what is expected from human beings is to be more in connection with the causality principle, to dwell on causes and effects and to make choices in this way. And, almost all of us experiencing this way of acting in ever-compassing examples in our lives.
Yes. I continue reading. Now that the atoms of our world can make advanced developments in order to emanate high energies which are the basic matter of a semi-subtle cosmos, superior to our cosmos, then our world is not a backward world as has been assumed or thought until now, but, regarding its material development, it is one of the most developed spheres with the most advanced matter constitutions of the whole hydrogen cosmos with all its planets, suns, spheres, systems and nebulae. Thus, human bodies, used by spirits whose evolutions progress in parallel with the development of the world, are also among the most advanced and developed beings of this immense astronomical cosmos. As a matter of fact, as we will mention later, with the beings forsaking the world completely after utilizing all possibilities of our world and accomplishing its applications there, its simultaneous transition to forsaking the hydrogen cosmos as well constitutes the living proof of this knowledge. Here, the part I'd like to underline is, human bodies are also among the most advanced and developed beings of this immense astronomical cosmos. So, our bodies are not the most advanced, so, there are other spheres in the similar level of advancement.
Yes, as our system is compared to other systems, it is left open-ended because we don't know anything about these systems. But what we clearly know is the stage of human is the last necessary stage to finish this hydrogen cosmos. And after reading the knowledge we read in this book, we must stop expecting aliens or extraterrestrial beings landing on our planet and saving all humanity etc. Because there is no need for this. Because, everything is provided with our world. All knowledge is already given to us. So, humanity of the world needs to take and interpret this knowledge and to apply to their lives, that is, to widen their comprehension. We must dwell on this point. Here, I remember the part of the book about the Mu cycle, the previous cycle of the world. The book mentions that the humans of that period had started using atomic energy 1,000 years before the sinking of the continents. You can imagine the rate of technological progress must have occurred within 1,000 years. It is only 100 or 120 years since we discovered atomic energy. Their technological prowess was way beyond of ours, but their era ended anyway. Therefore, what is expected from us is not to be very advanced in technology. Yes, we can do this, but to be able to finish this stage of human requires something else. We will read about this in detail in the further pages. I will continue with your example of dough. If you needed a salty dough, you can't bake a cake or desserts with it. From our salty dough, salty snacks or crackers are made. In short, by playing or manipulating with a certain kind of matter, you cannot produce overly different products. The matter for producing overly different results is the matters in the semi-subtle realm, which is superworld, superhuman stage. We already read the pages about mastering matter. Let me read that passage again. All antipathies, sympathies, grudges, cruelties, selfishness, altruism, self-devotion, gratification, bliss, suffering, in short, all values pertaining to all feelings and ideas that are called subjective, imaginations, thoughts, ideals, faiths, creeds, powers of invention and creativity, talents, genius, passions, desires, afflictions, habits, and all states that are called psychological, fears, courageousness, treacheries, truculence, feelings of good and bad, etc., are the manifestations of energies of various kinds that diffuse from matter that exists on earth but is not recognized yet by the comprehensions of mankind. Therefore, mankind's mastering these, overcoming these, means their mastering matter, overcoming matter. So, dear friends, what we call freedom is not gained by more advanced technology. Sorry, this is not possible. This is only possible by discovering higher or subtler states of matter. And for us humans, these higher or subtler states of matter is these states of emotion and thoughts. The book states that you call these states spiritual, but they are matter too. Previously you didn't know this, but now you receive this knowledge. And these states are the highest points of the matter of this cosmos. When you recognize, discover, know and apply these, then you can master the matter, and then you can finish this stage of human, finish this hydrogen realm. There is a quote, maybe it's anonymous, the whole journey is from myself to myself. Indeed, everything we did, we do, and will do is all about widening our comprehension until we really know our real self, that is, our being. So, it is up to us.
There are many questions and comments in the chat box about the aliens. Let me read that sentence again. Thus, human bodies, used by spirits whose evolutions progress in parallel with the development of the world, are also among the most advanced and developed beings of this immense astronomical cosmos. This doesn't mean the alien bodies just like human bodies. The book mentions the beings that are developed enough to govern and manage the matters in those spheres by their influences. So, the capability of the beings is emphasized here. And, aren't we all space folk? Our planet is traveling in the space. I think, instead of spending our attention and energy for fantasies about extraterrestrials, for getting messages from them, etc., it is better to consider that we, as the Earth, is not the only planet with life, and there are bodies in varying levels of development built from the matters of other spheres by the beings that are in service to the evolution of the spites. This may be a better, a down-to-earth approach. They are beings, as well. There are also questions about parallel universes. Would you like to say something about these questions?
There is a confusion about the universe and cosmos. I think, as we changed some terms in the Turkish editions of the book, we will need a revised English version, as well. Soon, we will read in the book a detailed explanation about this confusion, and also we will see the first figure in the book. Yet, here, let me add this. I kindly urge our friends to remember the part 1 just read from the previous pages of this book, the part about mastering matter. If they read and watch with attention, they will understand that everything already exists here, when we become aware of what already exists and include this in our field of application, we will easily see that we don't really need any extraterrestrial intervention or contact. As to the parallel universe theory, well, this is a theory. We can talk about it until morning hours, but actually, nobody knows about these. If I say, yes, there are parallel universes, it would be wrong. If I say, no, there are no parallel universes, it would be wrong.
But the certain thing is that the projection of my being is in the hydrogen cosmos, and because of this, I can only know about this hydrogen cosmos. And also, all other spheres or planets are also in the hydrogen cosmos. The book does not state or imply that the beings do applications in other universes.
Yes, let me explain this confusion of concepts in another way. The word universe in the parallel universes theory and the word universe used in the divine order and the universe have different meanings. When we watch a space documentary on TV, we always hear the word universe, but actually this word doesn't contain what is meant by this book. Soon, we will read the related part and see the related figure about this distinction.
Yes, as you said, the word universe used in this book is a concept that encompasses whatever related to matter in the matter universe. Perhaps, the scientists theorizing about parallel universes also intuit things about the greater reality of the matter universe and the realms, cosmoses within it, but still cannot find the proper words or descriptions to convey these intuitions. As our comprehension widens, the meaning of our concepts and terms convey will get developed more and more. Alright, let's go back to the topic of the being's applications in bodies of other spheres. Yes, we don't know about other worlds, about those applications of the beings in other spheres, but from what we read in this book, we can understand the process is similar, in accordance with the needs of the spirits, the beings, as the vehicles of the spirits in the crude matters of spheres, build bodies from these matters. So, the process doesn't change from Mars to Venus. And the most important point in the pages we just read is that, when the being reaches the developmentary point of finishing the stage of human, it will not need to build other bodies from the matters of the hydrogen cosmos. In other words, the wheel of samsara stops there. The being will leave this hydrogen realm and pass to the plan of love, which is a semi-subtle realm. And we call this the closing of the world school. Alright, I continue reading. Let us make a rough diagram of the universe by likening it to 30 or 40 concentric spheres which are larger than one another, with their cosmoses entwined. The crudest and most primitive of these is the smallest sphere in the middle, which we called the amorphous initial matter stage. Let's closely study this figure. The part in the center is the amorphous matter field, the initial matter stage. Next comes a field B, and next a field C. I continue reading. Figure 1 shows the cross-section of the first 3 of the concentric spheres we mentioned. Here, field A shows the initial developmental field of matter which corresponds to the mechanical evolutionary stages of spirits, starting from the initial matter up to hydrogen, which is quite obscured. Field B constitutes our hydrogen cosmos with all of its celestial objects. And field SC is the first echelon, relative to our cosmos, of endless other cosmoses which are superior to our cosmos and which ascend level by level, which we call semi-subtle realm. Following this one, other stages will continue by widening further than one another.
Well, we had discussed these stages in our previous videos. Still, let's go over them quickly. In field A, the initial development of matter begins by the original influences entering into the matter universe, from outside of the universe, from the original principle. And this development of matter corresponds to the mechanical evolutionary stages of spirits which are superuniverse truths. In this field A, spirits gradually evolve by a passive manner, later they get impressions from the initial matter parts or particles by jumping from one particle to another, later, they connect to atoms, and in the structure of these initial atoms, there are evolutionary values and prime values of the original principle. Later, by getting more and more experienced with the atom, the spirits become able to gather other matter parts, and this leads to the development of matter, starting from the initial matter up to hydrogen, but this field is dark for us humans. And field B is our hydrogen cosmos with all of its celestial objects, galaxies, etc. The development of matter leads to more complex elements, and the higher energies emitted from these now radioactive elements emerge as a disarrayed field of semi-subtle energies. So, field C is the first echelon, relative to our cosmos, of endless other cosmoses which are superior to our cosmos, and which ascend level by level, which we call semi-subtle realm. And when spirits reach to the stage of being, prime energies descend into this field, then spirits can build bodies in that semi-subtle realm as vehicles for them in the hydrogen cosmos. Yes, I mostly used the words of the book in this summary.
What we see here, within our matter universe there is nothing but matter. Crude or subtle, all is matter. And our being is built in the semi-subtle realm, but also, through the bodies it built in crude matter, our being is doing applications in the hydrogen realm. Yet, its existence continues towards to ever-widening and subtler matter realms. Be it in crude or subtle levels, we are always subject to matter in this universe. We must remember this. That is why the book starts with the word matter.
Here, the book uses this phrase of, and field C is the first echelon, relative to our cosmos, to describe the semi-subtle realm. And this semi-subtle realm is the realm where the being learns utilizing higher influences, higher energies that the being will use in the higher plans, in the realms of duty. That is why the book names this realm as semi-subtle. And later in the book, except once, these higher realms are described as subtle. So, this semi-subtle realm is where the being learns how to harmonize with those subtle realms. If we notice, the being is built from the matters of the semi-subtle realm, and when the being builds bodies, it always uses the matters, atoms, and cells of the hydrogen cosmos. The being doesn't have a chance to build bodies from higher matters. Until when? Until the being completes the stage of human, and then, the being passes to the semi-subtle milieu which is called as the plan of love in the book. This milieu is symbolized with heaven. Only in that semi-subtle realm, the being has to become of that matter and be able to build a body for itself. Until the being finished the stage of human, it didn't have the chance to use this semi-subtle matter. And by advancing gradually, again going through stages of development in the plan of love, the being learns to become harmonized with the plans of duty.
And, let's remember that, the being doesn't jump from one stage to another but spend a period of time between stages in order to become harmonized with the next stage. The being utilizes these intermediary milieus for preparation before passing from plant stage to animal, from animal stage to human. So, there are different preparatory or developmentary levels within the semi-subtle realm. We only understand that the power of imagination works there. Therefore, I think, the semi-subtle realm has a very important function.
Let me add a few things to your words. For example, as the being passes from plant stage to animal stage, we don't know what kind of an environment or setting is built for the being, from these semi-subtle energies by the secondary influences sent from the beings in duty. And we don't know what the being needs to learn in this environment. There is no knowledge given in the book regarding this. Again, we don't know what the being learns in this environment before passing from animal stage to human stage. However, we read in the book that as the being passes from human stage to the initial steps of the plan of duty, it does applications of love in this intermediary realm. I mean, there are clear knowledge about this.
Alright, let's continue reading. In this way, by going through innumerable embodiments in many planets of the solar system in simple, primitive matter complexes relative to the ones in our world but proper for conditions and situations of those planets, the being acquires the merit to build the human body on Earth, which is the most evolved being of our system. And from that moment on, it sets off developmental processes which are in freer states and forms. Comprehension of the being in the human state has rather increased in comparison to previous stages. Its free will has increased at the same rate as its comprehension. And in accordance with these capabilities, it has started to intuit the meaning of responsibility. Increase in all of these capabilities has caused it to gain the consciousness of sublime developmental mechanisms called love and conscience. By means of this, under the increasingly strengthening pressures of their intuitions of responsibility, mankind strives to complete the human stage as automatically or semi-comprehending, and for this, they go through hundreds of thousands of refining experiences in their human lives, by living through the ages. Wow, I want to read this sentence again. Its free will has increased at the same rate as its comprehension.
And this means that responsibilities also increase. I mean, higher the degree the human beings feel or intuit responsibility, the wider their field of comprehension are.
And, here, we read. By going through innumerable embodiments in many planets of the solar system in simple, primitive matter complexes relative to the ones in our world but proper for conditions and situations of those planets, the being acquires the merit to build the human body on Earth, which is the most evolved being of our system. Therefore, to be born as a human being in this world is not an easy task. Even to be born as a human being in the Stone Age that we consider primitive compared to our times, was not an easy task. Imagine the innumerable bodies the being built and gained experiences through, until arriving a level of development for building a primitive human body. Of course, what is important for us now, as the book states in this passage, as these capabilities of the being increase, it gains the consciousness of sublime developmental mechanisms called love and conscience. And love and conscience are the most important factors for advancing our development enough to be graduated from this world school, to master matter and to leave this hydrogen cosmos.
Exactly. And there is a very important point made here which we need to notice. At the end of the paragraph, the book states that by means of this, under the increasingly strengthening pressures of their intuitions of responsibility, mankind strives to complete the human stage as automatically or semi-comprehending, and for this, they go through hundreds of thousands of refining experiences in their human lives, by living through the ages. That is, completing or finishing the stage of humanity is not only possible by semi-comprehending efforts. The important thing is the intuition of duty. I mean, human beings can do semi-comprehending applications of this intuition of duty, yes, but also, they can do automatic applications of it by observing rituals and norms, for example, as stated in the moral doctrines like, encourage toward good deeds, prevent from bad deeds. So, even though automatically, if human beings act in accordance with the doctrines related to living a life with goodwill, this may be sufficient to complete the stage of humanity. However, in the further parts of the book, we read that in which level we finish this stage of human, as we pass to the semi-subtle realm, we can only grasp a matter in that level, and continue with it in that realm. Well, let's use the world school metaphor. You can finish the school with relatively low grades, as well. But if you work harder, think harder and reach the level of doing semi-comprehending applications, then the reward is to be able to grasp higher level matters in the semi-subtle realm, matters that contain more influences from the fields much closer to the plans of duty.
As you said, there are levels within the plan of love, as there are levels within the plan of duty. Soon we will read about these in detail.
But for now, let's focus on one of the most important clues in the book. Efforts. And in the further pages, we will read together that most of the human beings will finish this school, but of course, the levels or the points of completion will be different from groups to groups. Still, if the human beings give priority to these efforts toward the love and conscience and the intuition of duty, toward mastering matter in the way we discussed today, then as stated in the divine order and the universe, I read. In this way, a being who attained the power of ability to do his deeds with heart and soul and with the purpose of serving others around by distancing away from the state of obtaining his material interests and even making it an end for himself, has now matured enough to leap from the uppermost levels of the world boundary to the fields of duty. And when he reaches this degree, after completing the suitable duty given to him by the plan of duty, he passes directly into the plan of duty. As you see, it is in our hands. We don't need to search for an external salvation. Everything is before our eyes, even under our nose. We need to put our feelings, emotions and thoughts on the scales to weigh them against the mechanism of conscience.
Well, you partially answered one of the questions our friends asked. When the plan of love begins, will the cycles of the world end completely, or will there be spiritual beings doing applications in the world? We read in the book that, when the cycle of the world ends, the planet enters a phase of material crudeness. After this cycle ends, another cycle will begin and the new world school will start within these cruder material conditions. And for the beings that still need to do applications under such cruder material conditions, the book states that after 5 or 10 incarnations later, within a time span of 8 or 10 centuries, these human beings can pass to the higher realms, provided that they can render the duties they are given, according to their merits. So, as an answer to your questions such as what if we couldn't complete the world school? What if we cannot graduate? It is not unlike a physical school. You are given a right for the make-up examinations or tests and trials. Of course, you need to work much harder for the make-up tests, and these will be within a time period of the planet with harsher conditions. As we read these related pages, you will see that the system always encouraged the beings for graduation. It is not about punishing them by flunking them or by giving them tests with impossible problems. We must always remember that, from the being's perspective, there is no good or bad. Even birth and death, when seen from the perspective of the being, is only about concentrating a flux of influence into a body and ceasing this flux of influence. These appear dramatic and traumatic when seen from our perspective. We call the natural events as disasters or the resultant conditions of our previous choices as suffering, but it is because of our dualistic structure and subjective conclusions. We even read that the plan of is only particular to the beings who have been absolutely freed from the world. Freed. Well, we are getting closer to those days to come, but of course we don't know if we will see those days or not. Maybe we will die and reincarnate until then. That's why I repeat that this current life of ours is the most important lifetime, because our efforts for widening our capacity for conscience, love and compassion will allow us to finish this world school in better grades. Recent pressures of life, like this pandemic, provides us with fields of observation, not the external world but our inner world. We can benefit from this pressure by observing our mechanical behaviors, be it personal and communal. In that sense, self-study becomes more important.
One of our friends asked a question about the levels of the development of the human beings that will remain on the world for more incarnations, but we already replied this. Maybe I can add this key knowledge, as a reply. Dear friends, in the realization of the divine order in the universe, there is no concept of punishment. Just as Tülin mentioned. This concept emerges from our duality and has roots in our entire past, even before the stage of humanity. For example, let's consider our symbols. We have a fire symbol in the religious books for the ones that will not pass to the plan of love. When we study this symbol of fire, we see that it symbolizes transformation. We already mentioned that for the transformation of matter into other matters, some heat is needed. For example, in our bodies, the oxygen we breathe is the fuel for all chemical transformations. Things must burn a little to be transformed. Let's think a human being that got stuck on some emotions and this prevented this person from completing some tasks. Next time, that person will need to be in more challenging conditions to be able to burn that stuck part, so this part can be transformed and allow that person to finish the task that left unfinished. So, there is no mechanism of punishment in the universe. There is a mechanism of guidance, observing and encouraging the beings towards the new possibilities for providing the being's development in the desired direction. Alright, another question. If the individually separate beings are not in the unitary, are those beings united? If the being there is single, is the spirit governing it a single spirit? Well, it is clear that our worldly imaginations are involved in this question. Today I discussed this concept of comprehension. The widening of comprehension. When we talk about passing of the being to the plan of duty, please understand that this happens with the comprehension of the being, not with its body. We become involved with these ever-advancing subtle realms by our comprehension. And as comprehensions of beings, that are less and less individual as their development advance, as they get higher and higher levels in the plans of duty, individuality diminishes more and more, because in those levels, the phase of adapting or becoming in harmony with the original necessity coming from the original principle begins for the comprehensions. This original necessity that is filtered from the unitary is branched out into those plans of duty, and in this phase the necessity is the adaptation to this harmony. As the comprehension of the beings adapt to the necessities at the initial levels of the plan of duty, they advance toward to higher necessities, and eventually, these comprehensions become together at the unitary, which is the union of all necessities coming from the original principle that bring the whole universe into existence and contains the flux of all the knowledge of the universe. Yes, we ask such questions from the perspective of individuality. However, the individuality we see when we look at a mirror begins to diminish starting from the initial levels of the plan of duty, and then we can only talk about the union of those comprehensions within a harmony, a union with the original principle's force particular to our universe.
Obviously, we tend to imagine this state of the being there as our current bodies. However, even our being is a perceptual point of concentration where all the essential knowledge of all those lifetimes gets unified with its comprehension. And even while we say my being, we still tend to think it as a body. We cannot understand how a being is a complexity of influences and energies in the semi-subtle realm, and even after learning this, we still imagine our being as a body as we know it. However, the body we imagine is only valid for this hydrogen cosmos, a body which is a vehicle to our being, governed by its influences. We talk about an immense energy concentration here. Think this immense energy as the electricity produced by the tons of water behind a dam. This energy needs to be reduced by resistances to be used in a light bulb. And by looking at the light bulb, we say, when I turn into energy, will I be a light bulb still? Let's say the blackout happened, that is, the influence coming from our being ceased, the function of the light bulb ends, but that immense amount of energy is still there, as tons of water behind the dam. It is better not to compare the dam with the light bulb.
Another friend asked a question. Is it possible that a human has reached the reality of the plan of love while living in world? While living on the world, us humans can only apply the small fragments of this plan of love, and by doing these applications we gain the merit or right to pass to the plan of love. Simply, by becoming less and less self-centered, and this appear as self-sacrifice, altruism, giving unconditional support, help. By these states of extra efforts, we get prepared to pass to the plan of love, and because of such efforts, this passing becomes easy, without strife. And, another question came. Does the being transform into comprehension at the end? We thank our friend for his good questions. This is a topic we always emphasize. Actually, the being is comprehension, after all. Those energies and influences gathered around a perceptual point is actually a field of comprehension. In the further pages of this book, we will learn more details about the relation between the being and the comprehension.
All right, time flew again. We thank you so much for your presence this evening. We hope our comments and answers to your questions were helpful for your study on this book. See you next week.
Good evening, everyone.